musician,
long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. Today on the show, I have Kelly Foley, who is Mistress Imperia. Now, Kelly, this is not something that you haven't done in the past. You have actually been doing quite a few little interviews all over the place, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right, Natasha. Yeah, I've been doing a few little interviews here and there, and yeah, it's been great.
So, Mistress Imperia, what is your profession?
I'm a dominatrix. I've been doing it for probably about 17 years, I would say.
That's an incredibly long time to be doing something, any job actually.
Yeah.
And I remember when I spoke to you earlier, you said you still think you've got quite a few years of, in it.
Yeah, definitely.
So something that you completely love, a career that you love.
Yeah, it's a passion. Yeah, definitely a lifestyle for me.
So you were born in Wollongong, which is not that far away, to a young single mum.
That's right. Yep.
And had quite a sort of happy upbringing, quite a charmed life.
Yeah, it was very I would say it was very ordinary, like very, very normal. Yeah, nothing sort of crazy going on there.
When you were 5, your mother remarried,
Yes.
and you landed up with 2 siblings, 2 sisters, who are a little bit younger than you.
Yes.
And not necessarily the most amazing stepdad.
Yes, correct.
And that caused you a little bit of sort of anxiety at home, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't. It really wasn't enjoyable, and sort of led to me leaving home around age 17.
Interesting enough that you were bright at school. You said you did quite well at history and English, and although you didn't apply yourself, you probably could have if you had done something else. Do you think if you had wanted to, there would have been something else you would have wanted to do?
Well, I sort of had an interest in science and, also medicine. I sort of find that really intriguing, I thought about doing nursing, and there's not too much difference in some of the things that I sort of do, compared to nursing. Yeah.
So when you were 17, you moved out of home, didn't do brilliantly in your HSC, but then you went off and started to work with youth.
Yes, that's right.
What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was great. It was really intense. And troubling at times. People were in really bad situations. But it was rewarding in being able to help them. But by the end of sort of the 6 years that I'd been doing it, I ended up burning out.
I think it's an industry you can burn out of, I think, on an emotional level.
Yes.
So you said that you had been travelling to Sydney and had popped into a store in Newtown. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Sure. Yeah, so by chance I discovered it was a latex shop which they sold latex wear, fetish wear, boots, things like that. It was called Kaiser's back then. And when I walked in, I was just like a kid in a candy store.
You said that you had always felt a little bit like you were sort of led towards that side of life. You said that there's a difference between some people are created and some people are just born like that.
Yeah.
And you felt that you were very much born into that style of fetish lifestyle.
Yeah.
How do you explain the feeling that you get when you're in that environment?
Sure. So it just sort of comes really naturally, really naturally to me. I feel quite powerful, I suppose. It's quite erotic for me as well.
You said when you were little, you would spank your friends and spank your dolls as well. So it was already there.
Yeah.
The spanking thing was already
That's
there.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, that whole spanking element is quite interesting, because you were saying that, there's a very big difference between what is an erotic whipping and one that is just excruciatingly painful.
Yeah. There's an art. It's an art form.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So basically, it's about, even before you make the first strike, it's about getting a person into a headspace. Making them aroused, getting them into a headspace. And then you would start off building into it by quite a light spanking, and then you will build into it.
Okay.
If I just walked into a room, picked up a cane, thrashed someone within an inch of their lives, they would be horrified.
It's a bit more like corporal punishment at school, not necessarily as much fun.
there is a corporal punishment sort of appreciation, sort of group of people who love that sort of judicial, schoolyard sort of thing. But on the whole, most people require some sort of, easing into it and getting into that headspace.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Kelly Foley, who is Mistress Imperia. Now, you left your youth work. We're in the store, and you kept on going back into the store and back into the store. And then what happened?
Yeah, so there was a spell where I was doing the youth work and on the weekend doing an apprenticeship. But yes, I found the store, and there was a woman who worked in there, and she looked at me and she said, you're always in here. I want you to call Salon Kitties and do an apprenticeship. And I was like, oh, what is this? And I called them and had an interview with Mistress Amanda, and that's how it all started.
I don't think people realise that there is actually a process to becoming dominatrix.
Yeah.
That you actually have to do an apprenticeship. Now, that apprenticeship, from what I can understand from you, it wasn't some sort of easy, here you go, here's a whip and a pair of high heel boots, go for your life. It was actually, you were actually required to be quite submissive in that role, and for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So basically there was a distinct pecking order between apprentices and senior mistresses. And you were sort of required to show an element of respect to them. You'd sort of do things for them, clean their dungeons. And in return, if they liked you, they would teach you skills. You'd go in on their sessions, and they would show you the right way to do things. So
there's a right way and a wrong way.
Absolutely.
There is, it is an art form.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that people don't understand. I mean, I explained to you that one of my friends, when I spoke to her, said that they wanted to know if it was real, if what you did was real.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely real.
There is an enormous subculture in Sydney, and particularly in Australia, that is operating in your space, isn't there? That people are just completely unaware of.
Yeah.
So you were an apprentice for how many years?
So it was probably about a year and a half or something like that you were classed in as an apprentice. And then Mistress Amanda would then run an apprenticeship sort of test. She'd come in, and you'd have one of your slaves there, and you'd run through and show her how advanced you were. And then she'd be like, okay, you've passed. I'm confident you can do these sorts of sessions safely. That was it.
So do people, when they come to you, men and women, do they want to know that you have done an apprenticeship or that you know what you're doing? Do you get questions around that?
Well, I sort of, on all of my profiles, my advertising platforms and things, I specify that I'm experienced.
Okay.
Experience really counts for so much in this industry. And I also put that I was trained at Salon Kitties, even though it's closed now. It's world famous.
Okay.
Yeah, so people will see that and they'll say, oh, I came to see you because I know that you're experienced, you know what you're doing. Yeah.
So the environment that you do it in is called a dungeon.
Yes.
And what is it? Does everyone's dungeon look different? Are they all set up the same way? If I walked into a dungeon, what would I expect to see?
Sure. Yeah, so it's funny. Dungeons are sort of universally similar
Okay.
worldwide. So, I mean, obviously some people have more funds to put into it, so it might be sort of, quite immaculate. But essentially a dungeon will have a rack, a sling, and usually some sort of medical table, maybe a whipping cross, that sort of thing. There'll be a point for suspension, and that's sort of your standard bondage equipment that you would find within a dungeon.
Do you have a dungeon as part of your home, or is it separate to your home?
So basically I have the whole downstairs part of my place is my dungeon, and I live upstairs.
Okay. So you've been doing this for 17 years. I can only imagine that, there's a myriad of individuals that you have probably come across. When you were first starting out, you would have had to have marketed yourself. You would have had to have got people to, come and see you. How would you have done that? Because it wouldn't have been sort of internet and, Instagram and that kind of thing.
Yep. So basically, Salon Kitties was world renowned, and up until the point where it closed down about 5 years ago, we pretty much just rode on its reputation.
Right. Okay.
It had such a massive, client base worldwide.
So would you put an ad in a particular publication, or would you, or was it word of mouth? What would have been the way you would have done it?
So back then.
Yeah, back
then I think they had a very basic website when I started. It was just starting,
Okay.
But it was newspaper.
All right, so in the newspaper.
That's it.
And then people would give you a call and you'd go from there.
Yeah.
Have the prices changed enormously since you started doing it? I mean, is it now, obviously, you charge and you must live, you this is your career, so you obviously live well out of what you do. But have you found that it's more in demand now, or that you're pricing it more expensively, or?
So I would say, I'm sort of, it's hard because I'm solo now, so it's probably just increased a little bit, I would say.
Okay.
But I don't have to split with a house.
All right.
With mine, so I can sort of keep prices down a little bit, and it depends on content too, as far as price goes.
So, are there quite a few houses still around that you would that people would be able to access or are familiar with? I mean, because I'm well out of my depth here. My question.
So
I'm learning words I've never heard before.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a few. I'm a bit out of the loop, but there's quite a few private dungeons, and I think that there might be one multi-mistress house around, and but there's quite a few private women, I think.
Do any men do it? Is it something that a man would do, or is it specifically a female, opportunity?
I think there's far more females practicing, but I think there's a few males, perhaps more in the gay community. But I use quite a lot of men in my sessions, joining for different things.
So if somebody came to you, then you would have another man who would join as part of that and as part of the experience for them. You were saying that in the beginning you only used to have mostly male clients, but now sometimes you find that there are quite a few couples who come to you, and every now and again a single woman.
Yeah. Couples, quite a few couples. They're all really diverse in sort of their dynamics within their relationship. And, just over the last 5 years, I've noticed quite an increase in single women coming and wanting to explore. Yeah, so that's quite cool.
In terms of the couples, do you find that both of them are equally interested in coming, or is it often male-led in terms of couples coming to see you?
On the whole, both of them are quite into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were talking about sort of techniques and things, do you wear the same thing every time you do it, or do you have lots of different outfits? I mean, you love latex, so I imagine that probably the outfits are a really big part of it for you. So what is your wardrobe made up of?
So I've got so much stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it's enormous. So, I love latex. I've got so much gear, so many cat suits, and then basic dresses, and then I've got a lot of leather as well. Again, cat suits, and then sort of, less full-on items. I really love boots, thigh highs and high heels. So I've got lots of that stuff.
A lot of it is dressing up and playing, isn't it? I mean, it's really like a dress-up environment where you get to put on something that's completely fantastical.
Yeah.
And then play in an environment that is also quite unreal in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So the people that would come to you now, how would they find you now? I mean, because now we've obviously got... Are you on every social media platform?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. That's Domina Imperia, and I also have a Facebook fan page.
Okay.
Which
how many people are on your Facebook page?
I think about 10,000 or 11,000.
You go, girl.
Yeah,
that's all right, isn't it?
It's really funny, I've only been having to do the social media thing for 5 years since Kitty's shut, and it's crazy, and people are really interested in what you do, for day to day.
It's fascinating. I mean, the idea that is, and I suppose that whole day to day thing is really interesting. I mean, how much do you work in a week? How many hours would you put aside for work?
So, good question. It really varies. And because my bookings are all over the place, it's hard for me to sort of keep a track of, how many hours am I doing and that sort of thing. But I tend to be, fairly steady. I've got a lot of really good regular people that come in, and then the new people would come from, there's a few different advertising sites where people might find me. Not Backpage, it's just been taken down, seized by the feds in
really?
the States.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so that's another massive story anyway. But yeah.
Is the job that you do, I mean, when you're filling in forms, I mean, this is, when you're filling in forms and they say occupation, what do you put down?
Entertainer.
Okay. Because, I mean, that would be an interesting question. You would constantly be faced with that.
Yeah.
And you said that your whole family is aware of what you do. They're very comfortable with it. In fact, your mum has actually joined you once or twice in a couple of, sessions that you've done.
Yeah, that's true. So I had sort of one of my adult babies was quite interested in sort of my mum and talking about my mum and sisters and things like that. And he said, do you think she'd come in for a session? And I said, I'm not sure. And I asked her and she said yes. And she was an absolute natural.
Was she?
Yeah.
So she really enjoyed herself. She had a good time. You obviously you obviously get pleasure out of what you do. Do you get sexual pleasure every time you do it, or sometimes is it just a job?
So mostly I can find something that's enjoyable or erotic from most sessions that I do. I couldn't sort of even think of one off the top of my head where I, didn't get some level of enjoyment.
The differences, we were talking earlier about the differences in, I think it was it the smacking that we were talking about, where we spoke about the different types of people. Can you go through that again? Like, what you enjoy and what people kind of sometimes want?
Oh, okay. So do you mean the different things that they come in for?
Yeah, I'm curious about what they would come in for. I mean, what motivates people to come into a dominatrix on a regular basis, and how do they leave? What happens to them in that through that process?
Yeah, sure. So the majority of people who come and see me, they definitely have a fetish that they can't be sort of catered to outside of my dungeon. They may have a relationship and they don't feel comfortable to, say I've got this fetish through fear of rejection, or might have been brought up and, been rejected. So most people sort of come in and, have their session and then off they go and, back into their lives. Some people can be more devoted. They might not have a partner and that sort of thing, and I'll take them on as a sort of a personal slave sometimes. Do
you find that they fall in love with you? Does there become an emotional attachment?
I think so. Yeah, definitely.
And are you able to manage that?
Yes.
How do you manage that?
So it's sort of, you've got to sort of set boundaries. there's definitely an emotional connection on both mistress and slave's part, and an exchange.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and the Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Kelly Foley, who is Mistress Imperia. Do you find that when you're working in this environment that you always feel safe?
Yeah, definitely.
How do you create that safety?
Okay, so for myself, I think it's just confidence and experience. I can tell often by a text message if something doesn't feel right.
Okay, so will you turn people away?
Yes.
So you will choose...
Very politely.
Okay, I'm sure it's your business. You don't want to be unpleasant. But so you will say to somebody, have you ever been in a situation where somebody's walked into your dungeon and you've just thought, this just doesn't feel good to me?
Never.
Okay, so you have a pretty good radar.
Yeah, it's a bit different to sort of the straight sex industry. Okay. I don't get, groups of guys coming and, they're drunk and that sort of thing. It's mostly people want absolute discretion.
And you can guarantee them that discretion?
Absolutely. I mean, I base my business on people coming back.
Okay.
So I'm going to respect their privacy. I don't ever text them, don't ever call them outside of when they've initially, contacted me. Yeah.
I suppose for a lot of people, their feelings of safety and insecurity are massive. I mean, when they're coming to you, some people have to have arrived there already to go, okay, this is, I have a fetish. And you were saying earlier that fetishes can be, you can be born with them or they can be created. And you gave a beautiful example of, a young boy and how that could be created for him. Can you just tell me that story again?
Sure.
As an idea?
Yeah. So, fetishes can sort of be created. I gave the example of, for, a young boy, sort of maybe developmental years, and perhaps his mother had quite an attractive friend who came in and, he liked the look of her and she might have smoked, and somehow, that sort of, come into a fetish for him. And I think that happens a lot with, things like smoking or foot fetish or stocking fetish, that sort of thing.
What do you find that you have the most of? What do people come in the most with the most desires for?
I do a lot of latex fetish.
Okay.
But I would say, I do a whole range of really diverse sessions. But within, the most popular thing within all of them would be anal play.
Okay. All right. Which is interesting. And with women, what would their interests be?
Yeah. So with women, they love bondage, often discipline, a little bit of torture, and maybe some erotic sort of play between myself and them. Maybe I'll do strap-on. Yeah.
So, the rest of your day, this is what you kind of do. What other interests do you have? I mean, outside of being a dominatrix, what are the other things that interest you during, day to day? What do you love doing?
Okay, so when I have sort of time, I really enjoy sort of hiking and getting outside. I spend most of my day in a dark room. So,
very nice.
Getting outside and hiking and just very, very normal things, going and eating out with friends and movies and, theatre and going to art galleries and just, so it's very, very normal kind of existence, I suppose you'd say.
Do you have a bucket list? Do you have a bucket list of things that you want to do in your life and achieve?
Yeah, I do. So, one of the things is that before I get much older, I'd like to go and do a European tour professionally.
Okay.
Visit London and then sort of Germany and yeah.
And if you were to do something like that, how would you arrange that? Would that be something that you could do? Would you do that on your own, or would you be able to do it with an association or a group of people? How would that work?
So what I would do is I'd do it on my own, and I just sort of research private dungeons that hire out in whatever areas, or there might be a bondage house in Germany would be more likely, and make contact, and set up a tour that way.
Germany is quite progressive when it comes to bondage and that type of environment, sexual environment. So is it somewhere that I know how industries always look to a certain place as the leaders.
Yeah, the motherland.
The motherland, very much. So
Yeah.
Would Germany be your motherland?
Yes.
Okay, so they're very innovative.
Yeah, they have the best dungeons in the world.
All right. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So that sets the bar for your industry. And Australia, in terms of the industry, how is that kind of progressing? Is that something that is growing, or is it becoming, we've had so much, we've had so many things that have come out of the dark recently over the last couple of years.
Yes.
This, acceptance of our transvestite community, and across the board, it's a lot of sort of sexual change. Do you find that there is a shift in perception of people around what you do?
Yeah, there probably is. It's sort of hard for me to gauge it. I suppose I'm sort of often surrounded by people who are into it, but I think the fact that I'm sort of sitting here now and been doing radio interviews and things like that is a sign that it's definitely coming out.
You're 100%. I never really thought about that as an answer. You're absolutely right. I mean, I'm sitting interviewing you for community radio and fascinated by what you're doing and having such a lovely time chatting to you. Unfortunately, we've actually come to the end of our interview, which is always a little bit sad. You've been listening to The Dialogue with Natasha. I've been interviewing Kelly Foley, who is Mistress Imperia, a dominatrix, and we will be back next week with another fantastic interview.